For most of my childhood, the Tucano was an icon and standard piece at any air show. I never admired it as much as I should have. This agile turboprop training aircraft, which was bringing in the new generation of pilots, and I mean, it's really quite sleek looking, and looking back, I wish I had admired this thing more. But I didn't, and so modelling comes to save the day to allow me to build a replica of this in my own home to appreciate, and Flight Simulator lets me go and fly these things so I can experience it and also watch back playback so I can see how just stunning these things were. Hey guys, my name's Ms. Modeler, and I'm just an average model maker and aviation enthusiast, and today we're looking at this thing. This is the Shorts Tucano. I love this aircraft. I mean, I say that about almost every aircraft. I'm sure you're used to it at this point, but really I do. Now, it's iconic black and yellow paint scheme from sort of the 90s and 2000s, and its special schemes that it had for the Queen's Jubilee and for other special occasions such as its World War II camo scheme. And this aircraft was built by Shorts in Belfast. Originally it was by Embraer in Brazil, and I never appreciated it enough. So today we're going to have a look at the history of this aircraft. We'll also have a look at the history of the model kit, and then we'll get into the box, have a look what's inside before we do the full construction of the aircraft. And I think you'll be really proud of how I ended up with this, as I think I did a really good job. Right, I guess first of all, let's have a look at the history of the Tucano. Based on Embraer's Tucano, this was the Shorts Tucano. The Shorts Tucano was the eventual winner of a RAF specification to replace other trainers that they had. For example, the Jet Provost, an aircraft that we've built before. This aircraft needed to be modern. It needed to have the capability to train people to go onto the newest fast jets that were coming into RAF service, and really to go on to the future as well. It should have a modern layout and a tandem seating, and this seemed to fit the bill. Now, there were other aircraft in competition for this. There was the A-20 Wimmera, there was the ND-1N Turbo Firecracker, there was the PC-9, and of course this. You wouldn't have heard of potentially two of those aircraft, and that's because they never actually got produced. The A-20 was an Australian project that, well, just never got orders, and the ND-1 did get produced, but again, just didn't actually enter service anywhere. The PC-9, of course, is a legendary aircraft that I've already done a video on, and hilariously is kind of the basis for the Texan T-62, which is now replacing the Tucano. So in a way, I guess that did win the competition in the end. In 1985, the RAF placed the order for the Tucano, and it was designed and adapted for British RAF use. This aircraft would lead people into frontline fighter training, including transitioning from things like the Tucano to the BAE Hawk. And with that, the Tucano became, I guess, the staple of British air shows and, I guess, to an extent, British culture. The Tucano did see some export success, particularly to the Middle East, and that's on top of the original Tucano being a success in its native Brazil. Unfortunately, we never saw the successes to this, no. The aircraft was produced by a British company, Shorts. You may have heard of them, and they've built a long legacy of aircraft, such as the Shorts Sterling and the Shorts Skyvan. This was probably their last really huge project that any of us would see. Well, other than the Shorts Belfast, but I feel like that's one that's best left to the history books. The Tucano saw a long and successful service with the RAF, leaving service in 2019. With around 30 years of service, this is more successful than so many other aircraft are, and it will be fondly remembered by those who flew it and admired it from the ground at air shows. And as we mentioned earlier, it saw a number of really iconic schemes, including that for the Jubilee, and for sort of remembrance of World War II with its RAF camo style. This aircraft will go down in history as one of the legends of the RAF, and I would like to think that a lot of people are still flying around in this in Flight Simulator, because I definitely do. I really enjoy flying it. And well, if you want to see that, you can head over to my channel, Ms. Modeler Simulations, where I'm currently doing career mode on Flight Simulator and also just taking casual flights and things like this. So I asked you to have a look at the kit tree of the Tucano. And well, the Tucano kit was originally released in 1990 in its white and red scheme, before being released in 2002 in its iconic black and yellow scheme, with the yellow stripes on top, below the wings, and on the side of the aircraft. In 2012, the aircraft saw another release with similar markings, but they had been updated slightly. We then saw a couple of commemorative boxings. That included the Queen's Jubilee boxing, which I've been referring to as the coronation throughout this video, so ignore that, I definitely meant Jubilee, and also a commemorative World War II camouflage scheme. There was also a Lest We Forget Poppy scheme too, and that was kind of it. And it's interesting because it's not quite of that lower, not quality, but I don't know, lower accuracy of the 1960s and 70s toolings, but it's not quite obviously at the standards of today with 3D scanning. So whether or not this would be released as a vintage classic or just as a standard boxing at this point, I'm unsure of. But I guess we need to go and have a look inside the box to see how the decals look and the kit itself. The Tucano. Kind of lovely box art, really. Really encapsulates the trainer spirit of the aircraft. You can see it says it's a skill level 2, and this is older boxing from Airfix, so not the red that we know and love today. All the details in the aircraft are on the side, and it has the sort of profile picture on the majority of the sides as well. The Airfix Flying Club token, and here's all the parts. The sprues are quite limited, and it's quite a simple kit to put together. It's actually quite a nice kit. The details fairly robust given its age, and it's really on the cusp of greatness, this kit. It's quite an oddity within the Airfix range. The details are mostly recessed, and as I say, they're quite nice. Not too much for, you know, overwhelming a new starter to the hobby, which is great for training aircraft, but enough that it makes a really lovely model once it's all put together. You can see all the cockpit and landing gear parts. You do have to assemble the cockpit. It comes with the standard tub and then all the parts that fit in it. The fuselage comes in 2 large halves, with the wings being put in and the tail section, and now obviously the cockpit that goes inside it. Again, detail is relatively nice. Probably not up to the modern standards, but honestly, I do like this kit. There is a pilot that comes with it without legs, and here's the transparencies. Again, these look quite good. Again, for that age, I'm quite surprised by how nice they are. The decals are also quite nice, giving the lovely vibrancy of the yellow, except I did find the rounders not to be the best and somewhat fell apart. The instructions I unfortunately didn't video, but they are relatively standard for the age. Well, now we've seen inside the box, you can see that this kit is fantastic, but the proof is in the pudding. Is this kit going to go together as nicely as the kit looks? And is there a glaring issue that's going to require me to buy additional parts? Well, yes, I'm just going to tell you that now. Putting this kit together, I guess, starts like any other, and that is with the cockpit. You can see I've popped in the seats, and then you put in the instrument panels front and back. There's then a cover onto the rear one that I just slot into place, and then it's just a case of gluing it as well. Again, I've said this so many times throughout this video, but this kit is actually quite nice for what it is. And yeah, there's a cover on the front one as well. It does look really good. Like, I'm quite surprised at how nice this kit looks given its age. You'd think it would look so much more, I don't know, dated, but it does really look like a modern kit just not on the modern sprue or modern box art. There is one overwhelming problem that you'll see with this kit, which is probably why most people would say it's not up to current standards. So spend time to give it a slathering of paint, and it probably looks like I'm not really doing anything. And in the end, I do use reference photos to make sure I try and get a somewhat accurate cockpit, but I'm also aware that at 1/72nd scale the cockpits are generally not super visible, so I'm never too fussed about putting all of my effort into them, though I do try and just make sure it looks somewhat nice. This base layer is just to make sure that it has something to stick to, and I'm not too worried about the fact that it probably doesn't look that different from the actual plastic that's underneath. Unfortunately, for some reason I didn't fully capture me painting it all, but you can see I've got black onto the sort of the instrument cover panel, so the anti-reflective surfaces, and the sort of olive green on the actual seat material itself. Again, I've used online references to try and make sure I've got something that is somewhat accurate. And then just a case of going over and making sure that all the gaps are filled. There are decals for the actual control panels themselves, so I'm not too worried about those, and just want to make sure that it looks as nice as possible, because obviously once it's sealed in place it's almost impossible to paint it as nice. The inside of the cockpit gets a wash of paint just to match it, to make sure that it all blends together once it's all put together. Again, once it's glued together, it's really hard to paint the sides of the cockpit itself, so it's something that's definitely best off doing right at the start. As mentioned earlier, there are some little transfers that go onto the control panel, so I'm just going to pop those on before we put it inside. I then use my glue, this is Dulux Materials plastic cement, and pop the cockpit in, and then we'll need to make sure we seal both sides of the fuselage to hold it all together. We next have to glue the wing on, and I need to try and make sure it fits first before I do glue it into place. And it did get quite fiddly. I did find that getting the top bits to align really nicely wasn't the easiest, but it did overall go on without too much fuss. It's definitely not the worst one I've ever built. It does look quite nice. I really do like the shape and the look and the feel of the Tucano. It's a very pretty aircraft. I did try and initially clamp it before forgoing this and just going with a lot of tape, as you can see. But yeah, I did seem to get sort of it all fully bonded together with the help of those clamps. The tail section fits into the gaps that's essentially created when you put the two fuselage halves together. It's really hard to get it the wrong way around, and they fit really nicely. I did have them popped out at one point, but again, it's nothing too complicated. Once it was all together, it was time to do the propeller, and initially I did use the propeller that comes in the kit, and that is a big clue as to what went wrong with this. I did magnetize it as well, and that's fine because in the end I was always going to have a magnetized sort of propeller. It's just, it won't be this one that we get in the end result. And well, it's a shame because it did look really nice and it was really easy to magnetize as well. If you haven't seen that, just go and have a look at my videos on magnetizing propellers. It's quite simple. Probably the best video to watch are my Block MB210, Block 152 and IR80. Now, I don't really have any footage of me replacing all the parts, so I'll just explain here. The reason it's such a shame is because this plane is such a tail sitter, and every single forum I read on this said exactly the same thing. It's just a tail sitter, even if you put a lot of weight in. And believe me, I tried to fix this retroactively by putting so much weight in the front. I took the front nose off, the engine cover off, and I just put in loads of weight and I still couldn't get it to sit right. So I ended up buying some white metal parts. And again, I don't quite have footage of me doing it all because I was so frustrated I ended up just doing it. But I got white metal undercarriage, which I don't think I used, but I did use the white metal engine exhaust nozzles that go on the side at the front of the aircraft, and I used the metal for the propeller as well, and that did in the end mean that it was heavy enough to sit properly. But it's just unfortunate that you did have to buy these extra parts, but essentially I view them as salvation kits rather than sort of conversion or detail sets because they are essential. They're made of white metal, so they're much heavier than the plastic that originally comes in the kit. But yeah, it's a shame. If you buy this kit, be prepared for a tail sitter unless you either get in loads of really, really dense weight because you don't have a lot of space, or you buy the white metal parts. But yeah, I thought I would just explain that because it was just such a faff. What you'll also see as well is I don't really bother sort of the priming of this kit because it's just black. So I just decided to paint the whole aircraft with Revell's sort of black spray can because I had one to hand basically and was like, well, that's much easier than me doing it myself. So I just took it outside and ended up spraying it, which you'll see in a moment. But once the undercarriage was all on, and despite how much of a fuss I made it look, it wasn't that bad. It was quite standard. I did try and fix some sink marks that were present within the wings. I don't think I really fixed these too much, but I just used some watered down putty and just tried to smoothen it across and get some sort of smooth surface. Obviously I do go and sand this. I do that entirely off camera because no one wants to watch sanding, but I just sand it down to make it nice and flat once it had all dried. There were some detail pieces that had to go on before we can go and spray it, including some antennas and masts. Fortunately, they took quite a while for me to get on, and I'm not sure they really look that good in the end. And I did knock them off multiple times throughout the actual construction. Now we're on to the decals. Now, the decals are ish on this kit. I did find it quite hard to align the yellow that's on the side of the fuselage, and some of the registering on the decals wasn't the best, but that's to be expected of Airfix of this era, back in the sort of humble era of Airfix. Now, they do all go on okay, and you do have to be quite careful with them because they're all decals, so they are just going to fall apart quite easily. But I am quite impressed how well the yellow stands out. Yellow is such a difficult colour in both painting and in printing that I'm just impressed that it stands out over the black so vividly. It really does look nice in the end. A lot of smoothing out with my brush as I go, just trying to be really, really gentle with it, not to break it, but also let it conform to the surface of the aircraft, and also my silicone one to help push it around. The reason I'm leaving this in, by the way, is just to show you how long it took me to get this together. I don't want you to like think, oh, she did it really quickly. Like, no, babe, I didn't. It was a faff. It was an absolute faff. So if it's difficult for you, don't worry. It's just how it is. It's just how it is. Yeah, I won't leave in too much longer of this because it's painful to watch, but just shows how hard it can be sometimes to get it to look right. After a lot of fiddling, you'll end up with something that looks somewhat like this. Hopefully with less breakages than I had, and less faff than I had. But yes, eventually you'll have something that looks more like this. You don't have to do the wings, and these are giant yellow triangles, and they just look fabulous once they're on. Of course, we gotta make it match. So let's do the other side as well. I found that my roundels had a weird film around them, so I just needed to make sure I cut them out properly so that they looked okay once they were on the model. And yeah, it's that era where we have to put on the sort of the red inside the roundel separately, which is a pain, but a skill that once you've learned, it's not that bad. At least if they're in register anyway. The underside of the aircraft is going to look remarkably like the top, but I did find it all went on really nicely, especially considering the landing gear that was underneath. It fit around it really well. honestly why more model kits, like, you know, the Red Arrow sets that exist, don't come with decals that are pre-split so that you can just shove them in when the landing gear's done. I don't know, but, you know, it always works nicely and it just feels so satisfying. Don't forget, we've got to get the landing gear done too. In my frustration, I don't have all the footage of it, so there was some painting. Obviously, I painted the landing gear and the metal parts using a combination of galleries, paint markers, because I absolutely love them for doing sort of undercarriage, and I also used Life Colours Metallic Series because Life Colour paints are just sort of my go-to, or they were my go-to. I'm sort of now between Life Colour and Gallery. This was a project that was still in the Gallery, the Life Colour era, sorry, because this was done quite some time ago, as you can tell by my finger not being well in this. I had to make sure I did the propeller as well. Unfortunately, it's not fully in focus, that it's just getting stripes on. They're not even. It's very odd design, but I made sure I was using, again, online references to make sure that it was accurate, and this appeared to be what it needed to look like, and I kind of hated it, honestly. So, with that, I guess we need to go and have a look at the Tucano popping off, but yeah, just bear in mind I tried my absolute best with this, and we'll talk about my final thoughts at the end of the video. So, let's have a look at the Tucano popping off. Yeah, interesting build, right? I've never really had to buy white metal parts before, and it's my first time using them. I'm quite lucky because I have used white metal before. I had a white metal Sisters of Battle army back when they were only metal, so I have some experience with them, but that was like when I was a teenager, so I don't really remember it. Luckily it's quite easy. Just some gel super glue and it goes on really nicely, and it helps add that weight that was so desperately needed to make sure this wasn't a tail sitter, because that devastated me and I was really sad that I'd potentially ruined this kit. So buying these additional parts, which did cost me more than the actual kit itself, well, it was essential, but it came with parts and decals, and I used some of the decals as well. There was an additional decal for the canopy on the inside too, but I couldn't get that to work, so we're ignoring that one. But otherwise, yeah, I found those extra parts to be essential to getting this complete, and I'm glad that I found a review online, and I've linked it in the description, that told me to get some white metal parts, because otherwise I just would have been screwed with this. One of my friends, Model Minutes, actually built this already, and well, I guess I want to let you know what his thoughts were.
Yeah, so I built this one a few years back, and actually, you know, reflecting on it, it's not a bad kit. Granted, it's like a pretty old tooling by now, and we haven't actually seen this in the Airfix range for about a decade, but thinking about it, it was okay. Generally, the fit of the parts was alright, and the level of detail was fairly acceptable. You could definitely see in this kit the sort of direction that Airfix were going to take in the future, but hadn't quite implemented all of their latest details, designs and features that we expect from them today. The only thing I think really was the main problem with mine was the fact that although I did put weight in the nose, it just simply wasn't enough. But I did come up with a bit of a sneaky solution to this problem by simply gluing it down onto a little diorama base. But yeah, I'd probably have another go at this one if Airfix were to release it in the future, and the Tucano did have some very interesting paint schemes, so perhaps, maybe, we'll see this re-released as part of the Vintage Classics range. Thanks Ms. Modeller for letting me steal you away for about 60 seconds, and now back to your scheduled video programming.
Yeah, so whether I'd buy or fly this, I think boils down to how much are you willing to spend, right? If you just want to spend a $5 or a $10, which you can get this kit at shows for, then by all means go for it. But just bear in mind you need to add a shed load of weight. And it's not just adding like liquid gravity, because that I tried to do and the kit still just was a tail sitter. I ended up having to add white metal parts and waves, and then it was just about fine. If you'd used all white metal parts, so landing gear, the exhaust tubes, and the propeller, you'd probably be okay. But yeah, it's quite difficult. So if you're going to put it on a base and fix it, or just use something like a Y-shaped stand to prop it up at the back, or even make it in a flying pose, then by all means you're going to get your bang for your buck with this. But if you want to build it and have it sit independently on its own on a shelf, not tail sitting with a stand, then yeah, you're probably going to either have to fit in a lot of weight or pay for white metal parts, and that doubles or triples the cost of the kit. So whilst I do wholeheartedly say yes, buy this kit, if you don't want to put that extra money in, then fly away from it, because it does turn out to be quite expensive. But I really enjoyed that. I thought this 90s quality from Airfix is fantastic. It's so much better than the 60s and 70s, even 80s toolings. It's really good. It's almost at the point where I'm like, yeah, you could just release this as a kit and it would be fine. They would just need to fix that weight issue, which potentially would just be, you know, making it thinner plastic at the back or something. I don't know how these things work, but yeah, interesting, isn't it? Well, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, make sure you're subscribed to the channel to be kept up to date with my latest and greatest videos, and leave a comment down below. Have you built this kit before? And leave a like on the video too, it really helps me out. If you want to support the channel for and help support the purchases made, including buying those extra market parts when it all goes wrong, then you can become a channel member. There are 2 levels, and if you join the advanced kit level member, you get shouted out at the end of the video. That's the only difference, but you'll see that shortly. If you want to join a friendly community of model makers, make sure to join the Discord. The link is in the description below. You can chat to other modelers and share your latest creations in a forum style layout. And you can also read more on my website as well, msmodeller.com. And yeah, if you want to see me fly things like this Tucano here, then go over to Ms. Modeller Simulations, where you can see me doing Microsoft Flight Simulator Career Mode in VR. And with that, I'll see you next time, guys. Bye! A special shout out goes to all my channel members. Thank you so much for all your support. An extra shout out goes to my advanced kit level members, including Bobby G, Dafty Duck, Bob and Genevieve Albridge, David Barber, Taggers365, Jeff Dioramas, and my 2 longest supporters at this tier, Crazy Loja and Explosive Water. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, make sure to subscribe to the channel to be kept up to date with my latest and greatest videos, and if you want to support the channel more, make sure to become a channel member down below. Have a great day. Love you.